I would not feel good personally campaigning to put Rosemary into the situation that she was living in ever.
Welcome to the Hen Report. This is Jasmin Singer.
This is Mariann Sullivan.
And today we have an actual hen for the Hen Report, which is so exciting, and a human that goes with the hen. We'll get to Amber and Rosemary in just a second. I'm so excited. I could go on and on about why I'm so excited, but we'll get to that in a moment. So just a quick reminder about the Our Hen House podcasts. Rising Anxieties comes out on Tuesdays, the Hen Report, which is this, on Thursdays, and the long form interview on Fridays. Bonus content for Flock members comes out on Mondays. We are a podcast. We're on YouTube. So subscribe, hit like, and comment wherever you listen. We are so delighted to welcome our wingman this week, since it is none other than Amber Canavan, who has been on the podcast more than once, but way back in the day when she was getting arrested for doing undercover and rescue work at Hudson Valley Foie Gras. Now she's with PETA, and she's here to do a quick update on various things, including PETA's position on cage-free egg production, and also to again remind everyone to call their senators regarding the farm bill. But most importantly, I think, Amber's being joined by Rosemary. And so if you're not watching this on YouTube, you're going to want to. Amber, welcome back to our hen house. And Rosemary, welcome to our hen house.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here. And Rosemary seems pretty happy about it too.
Seriously, I can't believe it's taken us this long to have a hen on the Hen Report. But can you tell us who Rosemary is before we get into the questions we have for you?
Rosemary was part of, I want to say, a historic, massive rescue of hens from a cage-free organic farm in Oregon that was shutting down. And she is one of 435 hens who were pulled from that facility and are now living out their lives in reputable sanctuaries and adoptive homes. And I was lucky enough to adopt Rosemary.
Well, she was lucky enough to wind up with you. What a sweetheart, my goodness. All right. I might have more questions about her, I admit. But why don't we start with this? Tell us about this recent white paper.
Yeah, so earlier this year, PETA released a white paper about the failures of cage-free labels and cage-free standards. And it's pointing out that the image that people may have in their minds about what cage-free means for hens doesn't quite match the reality behind the scenes of what these egg producers are still able to do. And also points out that whenever you're mass raising animals for food, whether it's, meat, dairy, or eggs, there's always a trade-off. So whenever you try to tweak something in that system, there are trade-offs to the hen's welfare. Some of which, Rosemary and her flockmates were dealing with, which I, happened to see in person during that rescue. So some conditions, are very, very bad for them. And I can go into that.
Yeah, why don't you tell us a little bit about some of the things you saw?
Things that you saw, but also things that are widespread within the industry. Because I'm assuming the place that Rosemary was living was not aberrational.
Right. So, Rosemary, just like other birds being raised in cage-free conditions, are still raised in these massive sheds with tens of thousands of other birds. PETA has done investigations into cage-free facilities and, found 20,000 hens are crammed into a shed. And instead of the, walls of the battery cages, it's just a wall of other birds, the bodies of other birds that are just surrounding them constantly. Studies have also found that, since the birds are moving around on litter and the feces gets kicked up into the air quality can be worse. Rates of pecking can actually be worse. So, birds unfortunately cannibalizing each other from the stress of their environment. And bunch of other things that I can't even get into. The rates of barn fires is also higher because of the particulate in the air. Rosemary herself, she's, a beautiful plumage now. She was plucked almost bare. Oh, she wants to show us. Okay, there we go. So, I mean, she was plucked almost bare entirely on her back end when she was rescued. And now she's doing
Wow.
well, but she also was spared one of the more common things in cage free. If she might come over to show us in a second, but she was not debeaked like most hens in the egg industry are, whether they come from cage free or from conventional or battery cage facilities. So again, they were spared that horrible pain of having the tips of their beaks chopped or burned off. But then, of course, the injury from being pecked by all their stressful hens was worse.
How did you do the research for the white paper so that people would think it's not just PETA telling us this, this is real information?
So the white paper was compiled from peer-reviewed studies and government reports on the industry, as well as, just looking at the United Egg Producers. Yes, I know. Looking at the United Egg Producers cage-free standards as well is quite illuminating, where you can see exactly what is and isn't allowed by those standards.
And speaking of the standards, do cage-free systems vary? Are some worse than others?
Yeah, so aside from the standards themselves, management can vary quite a bit.
Can I just interrupt you for a second? By the standards themselves, you mean the United Egg Producer standards? Is that what you're referring to?
Yes, there of course are different standards. Like companies might have different standards.
Right. Different companies have different,
Yeah. So Rosemary came from a facility where they were already reducing the population of hens. So it was, much smaller flock size and flock density than even, most cage-free standards allow. And, the living conditions for her and the rest of the flock, even in this like half empty shed, was still, not something that any living being should be subjected to. And I can only imagine how much worse it was for these birds when that shed was actually, fully stocked to what the industry is allowed to do. So, for context for these birds, that means between 1 square foot of floor space and 1.5 square feet of floor space per bird. And as you can see, that doesn't allow, it technically allows them to be able to turn around and open their wings. But to be able to actually do that without bumping into or jostling another bird is another story. And I think that's something that people aren't really thinking of when they hear, the benefits of cage free. What does it actually mean for the daily life for these birds, and how intelligent and feeling and what their needs actually are just not being met by cage free standards. And I think that when even I worked early on cage free campaigns. I actually canvassed for the Massachusetts cage free law way back in the day, and unfortunately that cage free law would have been one of the strongest in the country. It actually got rolled back to be in line with Prop 12. So unfortunately, I think the hope was that we'd have cage-free standards, and that eventually we could get stronger and stronger standards and kind of regulate the industry out of profitability and out of business, while we were pushing for vegan eggs and everything like that. Unfortunately, what we're seeing is that the stronger cage-free standards have actually been rolled backwards in the case of the Massachusetts cage-free law.
Can I just return to that standards question? So there are standards in some of the laws in some of the states that have passed, which is a few states. I mean, there have been a few, and they might have standards. Then there's United Egg Producers, which is of course the big industry, I don't know, trade group, and they have standards. And then there are individual companies that they either have their own standards or they sign on to some third party regulator. And like, are all those standards very different? Are they all similar? When you say it's between 1 and 1.5, are those the outside limits for all of the standards?
Good question. So most of the state laws, as far as I know, are on the 2017 United Egg Producers cage-free standards.
Okay, so that's all the same.
That's all the same. Yeah. The 1 square foot to 1.5 square foot actually has to do with whether the hens are provided with vertical space or not. So if they are not provided with vertical space, it is 1.5 square feet of space. If they provide vertical space, which is like, a roosting bar up on the machinery, they can provide as little as 1 square foot of floor space.
Are the individual companies that are selling at a premium, or the third-party certifiers like I forget what it's called, but
Certified
that big
Humane
one.
and
Are they also 1 square foot, or do they vary all over the place?
so there can be some variations among companies. So for instance, Nellie's free range, again, that's free range, not cage free. But they'll maybe provide like 1.5, square feet of space, even though they only had to provide 1.2 square feet of space. And then they get to say that, they're above industry standard, which, is that really significant? But it allows them to be able to make that claim.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not making the argument that it's okay.
Yeah.
I just trying to clarify like what the standards are and how people would know.
Yeah.
And
Well, I mean, that's kind of the thing too, is that there are so many labels out there, and it's confusing and it's also misleading.
So you mentioned that you used to do some cage-free, or you have done some cage-free campaigning. We have this in common. I did back in 2007 or 2008, Prop 2. And I was with Farm Sanctuary at the time, so my messaging was different than at the time they were called HSUS, who were touring with us throughout California, and I was always saying, "And go vegan," and giving out the vegan recipe guides. But at the end of the day, I was campaigning for the welfare reforms. And I just want to say that our hen house is founded on kind of the idea that there is no one right way to change the world for animals. And so I'm not making a statement on what is or isn't effective, because I kind of have no idea. And we've been doing this for 16 and a half years. But I will say that I think that people should be true to themselves and and where they feel comfortable putting their energy. And with that said, I would not work on cage free again. I'm not saying it's like negative for others to. I have a sign in back of me that says liberation. And I don't think anyone listening to this podcast would be deceived that cage-free housing is okay. Mariann likes to call it a higher circle of hell, which I think expresses the idea that maybe some people think it's better than battery cages, but that's hardly saying very much. What about you? Are you taking the position that it's not even always better than battery cages?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a lot of nuance here for sure. The white paper takes the position, and PETA's views on this have evolved as well. Back in the 90s, cage free again, there was kind of this thought process that said, again, we can like regulate this industry into the ground and it will not exist anymore. Unfortunately, we have lobbying and very powerful industry interests, which I know we're going to be talking about in a little bit when we talk about the Save Our Bacon Act and things like that. But one, we're seeing, even when stronger standards are put into place, such as Massachusetts, and then they get rolled back to be in line with all of the others. So we're not seeing, that progress is made. So many companies now that made cage-free promises a decade ago have failed on them, and now even more resources are being put into trying to get them to, follow up on the promises that maybe the previous CEO 3 times removed made. But to get back to the kind of core of your question is, one, obviously the movement has limited resources and we all have limited time as activists. I'm glad I worked on campaigns 10 years ago and had that experience. But, I would not feel good personally campaigning to put Rosemary into the situation that she was living in ever. And the other side of this, and one of PETA's main concerns, is this rise of humane washing and the labels. We've had to do so much work investigating farms that have these nice sounding labels that sound like they are going to be, the best thing for animals to switch to, whether it is the GAP animal welfare labels, the cage free, the free range. And then we go and look behind the scenes and find that the animals are suffering sometimes even more. So the GAP campaign for Whole Foods, for instance, our turkey investigation had one of the most amount of cruelty charges of any farmed animal cruelty case in the country. And that was a GAP certified being sold at Whole Foods, for example. But the misleading nature and the humane washing, I still do street activism myself, doing one-on-one outreach with the public to, get a sense. And the most common objection I hear from people, aside from that they need protein, is that they buy cage-free eggs and they buy stuff with the nice humane labels. And that is the most common excuse and objection that I hear from people. It's having a powerful impact on preventing people from taking that leap to go vegan.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I always kind of say that humane washing is not as big a concern as I would like it to be, because a lot of people just don't seem to care at all. But your experience is that perhaps times are changing and people are paying more attention to these labels. And cage-free has now become a very major part of the movement, a very major campaign. People aren't going to just stop doing it. But I'm wondering, one of the things that PETA has done, and I'm wondering if this is part of your plan, is litigation. Because once you have something like cage-free, and once you have humane washing, you usually have lies that have been told. And that means that you usually have somebody who can be sued. Is that part of the plan?
Yes, we actually do have a form at PETA.org if anybody feels like they or their family members have been misled by humane labels. And that includes cage-free, free range, pastured, animal welfare certified, certified humane. I could go on and on. There's so many labels. We are always looking for people to talk to who feel like they have been misled. PETA has also, in addition to filing for, cruelty complaints, when we actually find illegal cruelty happening to animals, such as our GAP investigations. We've also filed FTC complaints. We've sent cease and desists to, there were some celebrities who are promoting brands of cage-free eggs in a misleading manner. We are looking into those avenues as well. But unfortunately, the industries have found all the fun buzzwords that make the consumer more comfortable, that are so broad and vague that they sound so feel-goody, but what do they actually mean? So for instance, free range doesn't require that the animals got outdoors for any length of time. It just requires that they have access to the outdoors. And if you check out PETA's Nellie's free range investigation, our investigator found 20,000 hens crammed into a shed with these little pop holes on the side of the shed where they could go out to like a barren field. And that doesn't really match the consumer expectation, because they've already filled in their head what they think free range is for the hens.
Well, not to get onto my totally favorite topic in the world, but I still think there's openings for litigation, and I think that PETA itself has pursued some, because the great thing about consumer protection litigation is, even if there's a definition in the law that is deceptive, as with free range, if the consumers are deceived, you probably can still sue. So I think there's lots. I think you should be suing everybody. I'm very excited about hearing about more cases. And as I said, PETA has already brought a number of them. So this is definitely something you guys are onto. And it's not just, they can't just say, well, the law says the law says that free range means this, because they don't own the language, and the law doesn't own the language. If people think free range means something lovely, then they have a problem. That's my spiel on hopes for more and more consumer protection litigation.
What do you hope will happen as a result of this white paper?
The white paper is really to get all that information all in one place, and also to, spark what we think is a very important discussion we need to be having within our movement. Even before I visited this cage-free farm that Rosemary came from, you don't get the sense of how much of a literal factory farm these places are when you go to the store and you see like a carton that has, a little girl with a hen sitting in her arms and she's surrounded by tall grass.
I mean, moving on from whether anybody should be doing cage-free campaigns, I would say that most of our listeners are not into cage-free campaigns at this point. They're mostly run by these big, very well-funded, effective altruism organizations. And I would say our listeners are more likely to be grassroots supporters of veganism. And I'm just wondering in what ways PETA is assisting activists who want to fight factory farming, who really are focused on eggs. Is it just a Go Vegan campaign, or do you have any special help for activists who are into this issue?
Yeah, so PETA has our action team, which is the activist list that's meant for people who want to get, more involved hands-on in activism, more so than our amazing people who sign our action alerts and make calls and things like that, which again, I know we're going to talk about soon with the Save Our Bacon Act and the Farm Bill. But we have resources for people who want to get involved in advocating for farmed animals. So right now we are piloting a program where people are taking video footage from cage-free facilities outside of places like Whole Foods. And we also have a fund to give away packages or samples of like just egg, so people can see how tasty and delicious vegan egg is, since, a vast majority of the public has never tried a vegan egg in the first place. So that's also a big first step.
If there's anybody listening who hasn't tried it, I just want to say it's really good. It's a little pricey, but it's really, really good.
Yeah. Yeah, we've been giving away coupons and things like that as well for Just Egg because, again, people just need to try it.
Let's talk about that Save Our Bacon Act, because we keep kind of dancing around it. And I think that one thing that everyone in the movement is agreed on probably is the Save Our Bacon Act. And we do want to offer an apology to our listeners, because when we discussed the proposed act last week with Matt Dominguez, we weren't aware that the current version in the Farm Bill did not cover egg production, though its reach is otherwise very broad and it covers meat, including from birds, and milk production. So sorry about that. So anyway, this isn't relevant to the cage-free issue, but it's still very important. Can you offer PETA's perspective on the Save Our Bacon Act and what people should do?
If people want to take action, they should contact their senators. It already did pass the House, unfortunately, the other week. PETA does have an action alert on our website at PETA.org to sign, and that will go directly to your senator. But the Save Our Bacon Act in particular is part of the Farm Bill. The Farm Bill is obviously this very large thing that deals with so much stuff gets snuck into it. It deals with budgeting and regulations and rules. And Rosemary's very angry about it. But the side of things that the industry is trying to sneak into the Farm Bill is basically allowing the meat and fur industry as well to gut certain regulations to their benefit. So it would wipe out states' abilities to ban things like gestation crates for pigs, where the pigs are kept unable to turn around for their entire pregnancies. It could also affect foie gras sales bans, for example. So the other side of the farm bill that has a lot of people worried is that the fur industry has lobbied to try to get something snuck in that would end a long-standing rule that said the fur industry cannot use taxpayer funding for foreign advertising for their industry. So basically, they want to be able to advertise American grown fur farmed products in places like China, and other parts of the world. And in effect, this would be a subsidy for the fur industry. It would be opening up all this taxpayer money for the industry to market their products and try to get that industry reset going. So the fur industry has been struggling for years, for decades, because of the great efforts by activists and organizations to make it less popular, to help regulate it through fur sales bans like passed in California. But the vast majority of fur grown in the US is actually not sold domestically. So obviously that would be, no one wants taxpayer money going to the fur industry, and that is trying to be.
Yeah, that's a terrible provision. And I just want to add too, I think that I think you should call your senators in addition to filling out the PETA form. And I think you can safely say, don't pass the farm bill if it has the Save Our Bacon Act in it, because they will know what that is. But for the fur provision, you might want to use the number, because I'm not sure it has a name like the Save Our Bacon Act does. And it's section 3201D. D as in dog. It just infuriates me that they're going to use our tax money to subsidize selling fur.
Yeah. And this is like hopefully one of the last dying gasps of the fur industry. I mean, most cities, if they don't have a fur sales ban in place, because of successes with getting Nordstrom and the big players that were selling fur just a few short years ago, to stop selling it, we're very, very, very close here. But the fur industry is obviously pulling out all the stops to try to revive themselves.
Yeah, desperate last gasp.
Yeah, totally.
I really just want to reiterate how important it is to call your senators. These bills are a disaster. They really are just the last gasps of an industry trying to save itself by using your money. So yeah, I will call, and you know how much I hate to use the phone. And just thanks so much to Amber for joining us today to explain this to us and explain what's going on with Cage Free. Don't forget to watch our other podcast, Rising Anxieties. Comes out on Tuesdays, the Hen Report on Thursdays, and the Long Form Interview on Fridays. Bonus for Flock members comes out on Mondays. And see you next time.
Thanks to Rosemary, too. Thanks, Rosemary.
Thanks, Rosemary.